Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Front Door. I'm Scott Benedict. I'm excited to explore a topic today that is really on the minds of, I know, a lot of suppliers and a lot of retailers in the omni-channel era. And a lot of it has to do with how that partnership works together, works more effectively. And it's kind of a back office function. It's not about storefronts or about e-commerce per se, but about some of the hidden operational gates behind the scenes of successful retail collaboration between suppliers and retailers. And I really think we're going to focus today on closing what a lot of us view, particularly a former buyer like myself, as a margin leak, where the collaboration or the partnership between retailers and their suppliers can be optimized and improved for the benefit of certainly of all parties. Today, I'm excited to welcome Greg Porlier. He is the VP of Sales at Vendormint. And if you're not familiar, Vendormint is a platform that helps suppliers recover lost revenue from invalid supplier or retailer deductions. It really helps them to operate or optimize supply chain operations and stay compliant with modern retailer requirements. Greg brings more than 2 decades of retail and B2B SaaS experience to his role. He's on a mission to help suppliers turn what brands many times accept as a cost of doing business into really a more strategic lever for margin protection and operational efficiency. And Greg, welcome to the program. We're excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there in person, but it's great to be here nonetheless.
It is unfortunate because, I do a lot of these shows with a remote guest and sometimes with an in-person guest. And I know you're here in Oasis, Arkansas from time to time and really enjoy it when we're able to get together. But I think those interactions is where I really learned a lot about what you and the team at Vendormint do, and why I felt like it was a great conversation for us to have on the show. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, excited to be here. I'm also excited to be part of the team. I think we've got a really good team that's been put together by retail experts. The team has a lot of expertise in retail audit, in retail deduction recovery. So we're pretty excited about what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, to that point, kind of, if you would, educate our listeners who maybe are unfamiliar with what Vendormint does. What exactly does the company do, and what kind of problems are you solving for brands when it comes to deductions and the compliance to the guidelines that retailers provide them to operate within?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Scott. As I said, the company was founded by experts for retail, also from industries that serve suppliers and vendors, helping them audit their retail transactions, helping them recover deductions, fines, chargebacks, all of these that usually lead to significant lost margin. So we're blessed to be able to have the team that we do. A lot of challenges associated with compliance and in supply chain often exist, and we feel that with the team that we have and the tech that we have, we're uniquely positioned to be able to try to help with those things. We're really focused on identifying the difference between invalid and valid deductions that occur from a retailer to a supplier. This is a very important piece of what we do. We're very good at identifying those invalid deductions and recovering those invalid deductions. Super important to identify the root cause of those deductions as they're occurring, whether they're valid or invalid. We think we do a pretty good job with that and recommending corrective actions around trying to figure out how do we prevent these from happening, in the first place. I think at the end of the day, it's all about helping suppliers keep more money in their pocket, and which in turn helps with compliance, which in turn helps improve their relationship with their retail partners.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the things that a lot of suppliers have mentioned to me, both when I was a buyer and since I've been out into the consulting range, is that deductions are more than just an annoyance. In many cases, they erode the profitability of the supplier, in some cases at a pretty staggering rate. Can you maybe walk us through what's a typical deduction case? What are maybe some of the smaller deductions that translate into lost margin, and how do you and the team kind of help the suppliers not only resolve that, but as you mentioned, find the root cause and try to keep it from happening going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's some significant opportunity in the space, and it's unfortunate because I think some suppliers simply accept, these deductions as a cost of doing business, when I think nothing could be more further from the truth. You might get a $250 deduction and think, nothing of it or not much of it. But if that happens over and over again, it certainly compounds over time and can significantly impact margin. And it's not because the profits the product's unprofitable either. I mean, this is post-sale revenue leakage that we're talking about, which in many cases can be remedied and prevented. Usually we'll see anywhere across our client base between like 3% and 8% of a supplier's annual sales to retail. We'll see that tied up in the deduction, dispute, claim recovery process at any given moment in time. We're not suggesting that we're going to get all that back or you're able to get all that back, but that's significant working capital that's sort of sitting on the sidelines as this process unfolds, in positioning yourself in a way to be able to successfully either prevent it in the first place is the ideal situation, or recover what's rightfully due back to you. That's super important. We're working to help suppliers ensure that the focus is on these invalid retail deductions, right? Documentation discipline is a must. A lot of suppliers struggle with making sure they have the appropriate documentation and that it's accessible and available. But these back office functions that we're talking about, they directly impact EBITDA because this is product you've already sold. This is cash you've already earned. And once you recover it, it drops straight right back to the bottom line. So we think there's some serious opportunity there.
Yeah, I want to build on one of the things you mentioned, that a lot of suppliers will look at deductions and kind of view them as a cost of doing business. And it feels like, in addition to the tactical effort that you do with your clients, you've also got to change a mindset, if you will, that shifts their thinking from it's a legitimate cost of doing business, and there might be legitimate deductions, certainly, but to treat them as not only a revenue recovery opportunity, but really getting back rightful revenue that they can then invest in growing the business, whether it's through retail media investments or improvements to packaging or other things that they could do to drive their business to a higher level. So do you find that you have to almost change a mindset as well as the tactical recovering the funds on any given occasion for a client?
Oh, for sure. I think the complexity associated with making sure that you're doing this effectively, there's a lot of complexity to it. The sheer volume of these disputes as they come in, if you're doing significant business with your retail partners, that's a lot of volume, right? This makes the whole overall piece significantly daunting, right? The thought of having to deal with all of this, and you might have internal staff who's trying to do just that, but these internal teams are pretty much understaffed. It's not their 9 to 5 day job. They try to address it when they can get to it, in addition to their other tasks that they work on a typical day. Data is often fragmented. Documentation is not always available. So, like, the idea of doing this, doing it well, doing it as thoroughly as possible, it's quite daunting. And I think if you are getting a lot of deductions, you really have to look at it, try to break it down. Are they valid or are they invalid, right? If the deductions are valid, well, what's causing them, right? What can I do a little further upstream, perhaps, to prevent them from happening in the first place? This is a very important piece. If they're invalid deductions, how effective and how consistent is your process for dealing with these invalid retail deductions to try to minimize the time that cash flow is tied up on the side? So I think there's lots of opportunities for suppliers to sort of alter the mindset, as you've put it, to be able to figure out, just like with every other part of their business, how do you optimize this part to do it as effectively as possible.
Yeah, and it seems like, as you and I have talked, and as I've spent some time really reading through all the great services that Vendormint provides, I know that you offer some things like supply chain optimization and compliance improvement, some of those things that are really aimed at reducing or eliminating root cause and trying to help a supplier improve their their business. Can you maybe just at a high level describe how those services complement the deduction recovery and how they kind of speak to this concept we talked about of getting that root cause and making the supplier's partnership with a retailer more efficient, more effective, more in line with guidelines, and how it's really important in this day and age, if you're dealing with an omnichannel retailer, to have all these things not only identified and reduced for the short-term benefit, but also to make you a more efficient, more effective supplier kind of going forward into the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Scott. I think you kind of have to look at it holistically, right? And in the mechanism of identifying invalid deductions and disputing them and getting the appropriate documentation, submitting the appropriate evidence, trying to recover those funds, that deals with and fixes issues that occurred in the past. But I think on a go forward, if you're really focused on supply chain optimization, you're in essence putting processes in place and kind of preventing these things from happening in the future. You're protecting the future and investing in the future, right? So whenever we recover money for our customers, we try to look at, why did this happen in the first place? What's the root cause? Was it invoice related? Was it shipment related? Was it compliance related? Did it have to do with ASN or routing data? There's any number of reasons as to why these things can happen, but focusing on it, understanding it, correcting it can help you be in a position to prevent future deductions. It'll help you improve your compliance. It'll help you strengthen your retail relationships. So we think that this sort of approach creates a continuous feedback improvement loop, if you will, as opposed to just letting post-sale revenue leakage continue over and over and over. Accepted as a cause of doing business, by definition, is insanity.
Yeah, and it feels like, that we're in an environment today where compliance requirements are tighter, that retailers' expectation on their supplier partners have only gotten higher. I've shared with you my own war stories as a buyer of feeling like I was positioned as a referee between my supplier and my employer as a retailer, and that was years ago, and now the challenges are, if anything, greater. And in some cases, it feels like there's a lot of automation that I think leaders just are inclined to let the automation do its thing, take the deductions it should, and no human come in behind that and kind of question, why is that happening, and is it value added or not, and either can we claw back something that's legitimately shouldn't be deducted, or, to the point that you were making, gain a learning and refine the business. And so it just feels like that there's a tendency to leave things to automation, leave it to technology, and human oversight isn't required. I suspect that you probably have a different view that leaders should really monitor the business, monitor where deductions are happening, and to ask those kind of root cause questions to say, why is this happening, and how can we make it minimized or go away altogether, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think, Vendormint offers our services for over 50 retailers. So one thing that we know for a fact is that retailers are moving super fast towards fully automated compliance enforcement. And some of them are moving much faster than others. Some of them, all different speeds. There's different compliances. There's different requirements. There's all kinds of stuff. But programs like OTIF, SQEP, ORAD, they are more and more being driven by system logic. There's very little human approvals. There's very little, human-driven manual exceptions occurring these days, whereas that, was a lot more commonplace, I think, back in the day. The burden of proof when something does come up lies squarely on the shoulders of the supplier. So we work to help them align their data, their documentation, their workflows, so that they're in a position to not be scrambling when they have to, prove their compliance when it's needed. But I think compliance is no longer about arguing the point after the fact. It's really about putting yourself in a position operationally so that go forward, it doesn't, you don't have these issues. Go forward.
Yeah. And one of the things, as you and I have gotten to know each other, I know some of your background is in B2B and SaaS platforms, a lot of it working with Amazon's 1P suppliers. And now you're focused, you and the team at Vendormint, a little bit broader. Certainly, you still work with suppliers to Amazon and Walmart, but you go beyond that. And I'm just curious, from your personal view, how has that experience and that kind of evolution of your own career shaped your perspective on the vision that you and the team at Vendormint use in your business every day, and how you've tried to kind of build a company that supports the things that you've seen and the lived experiences that you've had as a professional in this area, and the need to provide this kind of a service to the retail community?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Scott. I think the time that I was able to spend really focused on the Amazon 1P vendor space allowed me to, first of all, meet a ton of great people, the thought leadership in that space, the brilliant minds, like some really, really sharp people in that industry. And I got to work with a lot of great companies, a lot of great vendors to Amazon, some really, really big ones, medium-sized guys, and some small ones as well. But I think one thing was consistent in my time in doing that is these vendors to Amazon, in many cases, were also suppliers to Walmart and Target. And they would often ask, can you guys help us with Walmart? Can you help us with Target? Can you help us with Kroger? So we definitely saw an opportunity to add a little bit more value, I think, in that area. But Amazon, on the 1P side of the business particularly, has done an amazing job helping their vendors understand what a fully data-driven relationship should look like. And they got there pretty fast, I think. This system is totally, it's measured. A lot of it's automated. It's definitely enforced by systems and system logic. That being said, I think traditional retailers, and again, some of them are probably darn close, if not there. But they're trying to move in that direction, but it's all happening at different speeds, right? So our organization was built to help sort of navigate that for suppliers, because that shift from the old manual approach of reviewing everything from the requirements being, over here, as that shift occurs, navigating that process can be a little complex. So I think we add value in that area. And again, we're doing it for over 50 different retailers. So we think we're uniquely positioned to do so.
And that's one of the things I think in our conversations I've found is neat is that there's a lot of specialists who are working on this area for suppliers for a specific retailer. And the thing that always occurred to me is that if you have expertise in helping suppliers, that expertise is probably best gleaned if you're looking across retailers and you're seeing a little bit more of a global view of what's happening. And yes, there are unique aspects of specific retailers, but I think if you're going to be a great partner to a supplier, you've got a little bit more of a broader view if you help them with multiple retailers and you're a good partner in that context instead of just one retailer, even if it is a particularly large one based here locally. And my sense is that's kind of the way you and the team have tried to position the company as a broader, more strategic partner than for any one retailer. Is that the right way?
For sure, for sure. And like I said, it's you've got a lot of folks that are working with a lot of different retailers. And like I said, it varies from retailer to retailer, whether it's compliance or documentation requirements or process. To have a sort of a consistent partner to help you navigate that is what we're trying to do in essence. And I think that if we continue to meet suppliers on a fairly regular basis who have asked us for help to expand that offering, right? Hey, can you help us with Sephora? Can you help us with Ulta? Guys like that, for example, and to be able to sort of onboard that as an offering here in the ecosystem is something I think that helps us also add more value.
Yeah, I'm curious because we have a lot of brand owners, a lot of brokers, a lot of suppliers. I know in our audience, I'm curious if through the work that you and the team do, if there are some recurring themes or blind spots that you see a lot of your clients have about their business in the broader context? And are there any kind of best practices or key watchouts maybe that you advise some of your clients or potential clients to say, this is a recurring theme. We see this a lot. Please be on the lookout for this thing. Is there anything like that?
There are, and when I say there are quite a few of them, I'm not suggesting that the lion's share of suppliers have opportunities in all these areas. But you talk to enough people and you work with enough people over time, you're going to see things that happen more than just occasionally. I think some of those things would be, like we talked about earlier, you cannot assume that deductions are simply a cost of doing business. You have to be in a position to do something about them, to effectively treat them, if you will, and to be able to recover those invalid deductions in a consistent, process-driven manner. I think the lack of documentation discipline is a big one. We work with a lot of suppliers who struggle with, when it comes time to fight a deduction that is invalid, to secure the appropriate documentation, to secure the appropriate evidence with that dispute, to be able to ensure that you're getting that money back as quickly as possible. I think that's the second one. I think focusing on dollars recovered as opposed to root cause analysis for deductions, that's probably an opportunity as well. Not taking ownership of the data. Don't rely on the retailer portal for your data needs, for data insights, right? For data analysis. I think that hampers your abilities in those areas for sure. Treating compliance as a logistics issue, which we see, often, which makes sense in theory, but compliance directly impacts profit. So I think finance needs to have some insight into it, whether it's for modeling or whether it's for projecting or whatever the case may be. But it is kind of a finance issue. And then waiting too long to file disputes and to chase those, because not only does it make it harder to get them back, but that money's just sitting there tied up on the sideline every day that goes by that you don't file a dispute for something that should be disputed.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is that there's a lot of recurring themes that I suspect that you and the team have got to see. And those I think in my own experience as a retailer echoes what you shared. One of the things that has come up in my work recently is some work with smaller, maybe more startup suppliers. So if you take that as a subsegment of the group of people that you do with, are there maybe any suggestions you have for smaller suppliers who are maybe just getting going with large retailers? You mentioned the data and the documentation and keeping things like that. That feels like a logical suggestion to a small, maybe startup supplier. Anything else beyond that you would recommend if you were talking to a small supplier who maybe didn't have the operational expertise that a large supplier might have?
Yeah. Don't accept deductions as a cost of doing business. And even from the early days, once these deductions start to happen, there should be some level, even if it's not sophisticated, there should be some level of process in place that can be followed consistently for when these deductions occur to try to best determine, is this potentially an invalid deduction? If it is, what is the process for pursuing this type of deduction? I think there are opportunities there, because as the business scales and as volume increases, operational liability increases as well. And I think there's more opportunities for these to increase, which they most likely will. But if you're in a position with some sort of blueprint or template from day one, as the business scales, you can make that more sophisticated and expand it. But again, losing margin needlessly, I think that is probably not the right approach. It's definitely not the right approach. Yeah.
No, I think that makes sense. And part of why that's top of mind in a conversation like this is that I always fear that a smaller supplier, if they don't get that operational discipline, to your point, while they're smaller, that problem scales as they grow. And if they haven't solved it's potentially not only a path to not being profitable, but it could be a path to Chapter 11 if you don't get it fixed early on, right?
You don't want it to turn into a 5-alarm fire for sure.
Exactly. I think the last question I'll want to pose to you is let's look forward a little bit into the next 3 to 5 years. I know that AI and data analytics and automation is really changing to the point that you've made. The relationship between a retailer and their suppliers around things like compliance and deductions and some of those things. What are the things maybe that you and the team counsel your clients on to be thinking about going forward and seeing how this business is evolving that maybe you would want to highlight as, hey, be prepared for this or be thinking about these things as you look forward to the future of your business with your retail partners?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, AI is all the rage. Of course, I was at the National Retail Federation big show last week in New York, and everything was AI. I remember when everything was blockchain, and I remember when everything was, predictive analytics. But I think this one is here to stay for sure, making us way more proactive than reactive. There's no question about that. I don't think it's going to replace human judgment anytime soon. If it did, we'd all be driving around in autonomous cars without issue. But I saw something online about Ben Affleck was talking about AI. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I don't think he's that worried about it replacing really creative material. And I remember being blown away by how much he seemed to know about AI. So if you get a chance, look that up. But we are at Vendormint, we're already using AI for a number of things because it's already pretty good at things like pattern recognition, prioritization, search functionalities, likelihood of a deduction occurring, likelihood of a dispute being won. It can recommend corrective actions, which is great. I think as time goes on, it will allow us to even more proactively identify issues before they occur and fix those issues before they occur. Identifying if a deduction is going to occur before a shipment goes out the door, I think is something that it could potentially be used for. We've already seen it replace a ton of manual tasks. That'll continue, which should allow us as humans to focus more at the strategic level than the tactical level, which is really what it should be all about, right? But I think if I were to tell suppliers anything about this, probably a couple of things: investing in data discipline now, investing in documentation discipline, like we talked about. It's really tough to leverage AI if you don't have those houses in order, so to speak. But last but not least, I know I'm not saying anything that nobody knows here already, but those that invest in it and do it well, there will be significant separation between them and those that do not. So it's just that simple.
Yeah, and I think based on what I've read of the conversation at NRF or at the big show, that's one of the key takeaways is that it will create separation between the good and efficient operators, not only on the retail side, but to your point, on the supplier side as well. And just because someone's been successful up until now doesn't mean they're guaranteed of that in the future if some of their back office functions erode their profitability, and that absorbs all of the organization's time and attention instead of coming up with great new items and selling them and driving sales out the front door of retail, right?
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, the margin that gets lost in this process, in leveraging AI to put yourself in a position not only to deal with it, like we talked about earlier, the historical aspect of it, but the proactive, preventative aspect of it is, I think, going to benefit tremendously from leveraging AI in data and tools.
Awesome. Greg, this has been a really eye-opening look under the hood, if you will, of retail operations. And I think a couple things that have occurred to me is there's a lot of hidden retail reduction noise that just happens, and to our point in the conversation earlier, is treated as cost of doing business instead of a profit erosion and an opportunity to improve the business. Treating it proactively and really as a strategic discipline with great partners like Vendormint really helps a supplier capture revenue, not only that enhances their profitability, but allows them to invest in things that are a little bit more proactive, that drive sales forward instead of erode of profitability. And I think recognizing that risk and putting in place operational improvements in your business it makes sense for a lot of suppliers. I think not only from your and the team's experience, but certainly from my view as a former buyer, as a former retailer, that this is just. It's not a back office function that should be solved in spare time. It's really a part of being a good holistic supplier and running a profitable business in the modern age, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think, at the end of the day, I'm watching the show on, I think it's Netflix. It's called Nobody Wants This. And that title is so applicable to so many things. And I'm quite certain retailers don't want deductions. They don't want the hassle of having to do them in the first place, let alone deal with them once disputes come in. The suppliers don't want them. It's a unfortunate, necessary evil. And I think everybody would be better off if everybody was in a position where they just, were seriously minimized or potentially not happening at all. But, we're not there yet. Hopefully we'll get there.
Awesome. Well, I'll close on this for our listeners. If you want to explore whether your business with your retail partners is leaving money on the table, or if you want to see how deduction recovery and compliance optimization might improve your profitability, improve your margins, improve your relationship with your retail partners, I'd invite you to check out Vendormint's website at vendormint.com, and we'll put that up on a slide here, and consider taking them up on their offer to run a free audit and really let them kind of take a look at what's going on in your business and your partnership with your retailers, and see if there's something they can do to help you have a even more profitable and more compliant business. And so, Greg, thanks again to you and the team at Vendormint for what you do, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. This was great. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the time.
You bet. My pleasure. So for the Digital Front Door, I'm Scott Benedict. Thanks for watching.